Okay, we're going to look at another one from nothing, and this one will be a little bit different than the last two that we did, for from nothing seems to have changed a little bit, and his art is getting much better, and his production is getting much better, and his knowledge is getting much better, and what he is actually telling is much better. In this video, I believe all in one video, he debunks the idea of Negroids having been pre-anybody to the Americas, whether Amerindians or have anything to do with any Indian whatsoever, or South Americans. Also, he brushes against the Egyptians a little bit there too. He also talks about the non-contingency, or the fact that Khoisan aren't really related to Congoids, Capoids, and so on. East Africans have no relating to the other ones. Bantu expansion causes things that look in appearance today much different than they were before, and that blacks were not the Olmecs. He also talks about how blacks are not a part of the Bible. And so I think it just about covers the lineage. And with just a small statement or two, he is able to clarify that blacks really weren't out of Africa in any way, shape, or form, not in North Africa or East Africa until much later. Let's look into this.
Hello everyone, it's Jabari here.
Sup, Bar?
There's a growing trend of people who claim to be descended from the original Native Americans or pre-Columbian settlers.
One of them has been in the news here lately with Chief Whitey Pocahontas. Blah, 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 blah. So we're not going to pretend that there aren't stupid people in the world, or that tried to justify doing something. What she did was got help to a grant to school or something in some way, and in that process claimed that she had some heritage, which, looking at the genetics, she does a lot more than African Americans do, but not enough to qualify for anything, and so that's bad. And the whole thing that came out of it, Trump made a fool of her. But let's continue.
It's cool and all, but the only problem is the people who are making these claims are black or African Americans. While it is true that many African Americans possess Native American heritage, the average percent hovers only around about 0.8%.
I made a vid here recently that shows the black man that shows black heritage. He's got, I believe, Irish ancestry and stuff with him. He has worked with genetics labs and stuff on blacks, and they can actually pinpoint exactly which area you come from, or if perhaps the slaves that originated you were like from Ghana and Chad or Senegal and so on, that they can give you that mix and tell you where your heritage actually comes from easily. And doing so on these videos, though, there's something that was found, is that a lot of black people were claiming that their grandma was an Indian and all these type of things, and they had real straight hair and all this stuff. I've got a video that shows where someone has clipped and put it together, and what it in reality showed is that no, they didn't have any in partial at all. I mean, Tina Turner, Morgan Freeman, Chris Rock, 5 or 6 others, Jackie Joyner Kersee, just a bunch of them. But what I do like, if you watch that show, it's incredible. I wish I could name it off the top of my head. Somebody will down in the comments. But what I like about that show is it shows, well, it does break through some of the lies, but it also shows true black heritage, and they can find records of whenever there were freed blacks and they owned land and all kinds of stuff way back when, and it's amazing, and you might be able to grab some of your heritage. I'd like to also mention I tried to do this to my own family, and it always, let me tell you, it always, except for in certain cases, almost becomes a bit of conjecture. And then you've got to try to connect yourself to other people and names and stuff that were from over here. Well, they come from that and everything. And if you can get in their elder records, you might find an European heritage. So it doesn't go back for many people far really at all. In fact, the idea of keeping records of just peasant people and stuff is really something somewhat new for the world, where everyone has that same dignity as the king. For the king is one of the people, in a different light than was looked at back in the ancient Egyptians and Sumerians, where they were actually a god. Caesar and all these things is the end of that. Rome falls, but Rome bleeds out a thing that became modern society. But let's continue.
Perhaps the most frequent topic discussed in connection with blacks in the Americas during the pre-Columbian era relates to the famous colossal stone heads unearthed in Mexico in 1862 by Jose Melgar. Melgar and subsequent archaeologists pointed out seemingly Africanoid features such as wide nostrils, thick lips, and what appeared to be cornrows, as well as West African war helmets. They proposed that these were created in the image of pre-Columbian African explorers. These ideas were further popularized by the writings of a Guyanese-born professor, Dr. Ivan Sertima.
Sertima's stuff has been totally debunked, like repeatedly, over and over again, but it did start a movement known as Afrocentrism or Negrocentrism. You can't really call it Afrocentrism whenever the top third of Africa and East Africa, all the way to the Horn up until recenter times, was all Caucasians and stuff. And there's remains down in the Cape at Hoffmeyer site at 40,000 BC showing Caucasians. So really, it's been debunked a long time ago. Sertima has. But let's continue.
It continued to be perpetuated by Dr. Clyde Winters, who pretty much claims that every single major world civilization was created by blacks. However,
facepalm. It's a self-causing racist hate thing that's going on, and I've got a video I just did where it seems like Clyde Winters is putting out what seems to be reasonable data, although it contains some genetic things in there that are trying to connect. Strangely, it says that all sub-Saharan Africans have a little bit of Neanderthal from some Caucasian admixtures way back when, and he's reporting it. Now, I can show you other ads where he tells you that the Greeks, just like he just said, the Greeks are Negroids. The Vikings are Negroids. Virtually everyone he shows these videos about, and he sits and talks this crap. And I don't know why he gets published on the other end yet, except for what it's really doing is trying to bunk up his cred with putting out some decent articles, perhaps, and then being able to put out crap and say, well, look, people think I've got cred. It's kind of disgusting.
When compared to the facial features of indigenous people of the region, they are virtually identical, as these are genetic adaptations to tropical climates found in many diverse populations all around the world.
It happens all around the world, and not to Negroids. More of that facial feature. You'll see a more arched, a thinner nose, and things like that. Even the nasal slit will get wider and wider as you get closer to the equator. Now, blacks lived around the equator for a lot, so we're going to see skulls here in a moment. Well, actually down the road here a little bit, and you'll be able to tell a nasal slit that's very slender and one that's thick. People that know craniometry can actually just glance at a skull and tell you pretty much a lot about it. It's amazing because of just, scientific knowledge. This guy in the top left-hand corner, I did a video on this one right here. This is actually a tour guide from there, and somebody just took and matched that up, and they matched it in size, and then they scale it left and right in halves and show you that looks like the guy, kind of, right? Back and forth, a little bit like him. And then all of a sudden it gets real fast, and can you tell the difference? Look at the lip lines, look at everything, and how this guy up here, it may even be this exact statue here. No, I think it's this one here that this kid looks like, and somebody else has shown how it all lines up and so on. But let's continue. Just let him go.
Not just Africans.
It doesn't happen to just
The
Africans.
hair only looks like cornrows superficially and can easily be rolled out as simple braids, common in many cultures of the Americas.
Common in many cultures around the world. Blacks aren't the only ones that could braid their hair. It's one of the styles they do whenever they keep their natural hair nowadays, is to do braids and things rather than do fros, and so there's different styles that go on, but that doesn't make it a black hairstyle. This cultural appropriation, and that's me. Well, if you cornrow down your head, that's one thing, but this is just simplistic braids that are shown here, even with dolls and stuff in the end, and they're actually a double braid. People have made note that it herringbones in on double, so it's actually like groups of hair and then braided and then done into that. So no, and he'll tell you no, but let's go.
There are also no giant stone heads to be found anywhere on the continent of Africa. If these were really made in the image of African explorers, you'd think that such a large, imposing, and complex artistic practice would also have been common in Africa too, if that's where it originated. The most popular argument is that Abu Bakr II of the Mali Empire traveled to the Americas, establishing settlements or teaching the Olmec what they know.
Now, I've had that happen in my vids quite a few times where they try to say that and attach it to Olmecs and they attach it to things. Abu Bakr is way after Islamic slave trade. Blacks never had a seaworthy boat. These are Egyptian-style boats here, derived out of Sumerian reed boats that ended up becoming Egyptian reed boats and so on. And sails and being able to sail the New World wasn't something blacks were really capable of do. They never have shown the evidence of a seaworthy boat. And people didn't believe Thor Heyerdahl could make it across in a reed boat. They were like, well, you just keep this radio and we'll keep in contact with us because we're going to have to yank your ass at any minute. And he made it all the way to Easter Island the first attempt. And the second attempt, he left out of the Pillars of Hercules area and headed straight across and dove down at South America, and it swept him right over into the Indies, and pretty much just like the Columbus type of thing. And it shows contact. He'll mention a few contacts here. I've got other contacts in other videos. I think I'll probably talk over that moment too, like I do. Let's continue.
This is quite easily explained away as well.
Yep.
While there is a high probability that this voyage actually did take place, it would have happened in 1311 CE, while the Olmec civilization dates back to anywhere between 1500 and 900 BCE.
So these timelines make it impossible. They're like, oh, well, look, here, this happened, and it's like, that's not the Olmecs, though, but they won't cognate that fact. It's one of the times that you can easily debunk them so easy. They'll try to put those two together somehow that far apart without even thinking through it, just grabbing. And you can go, well, Olmecs date to this, and then they just get mad, and stuff, and then they start saying things about Neanderthals.
Over 1,000 years prior to Bakar's voyage.
Oops.
Even if this voyage was proven without the shadow of a doubt to have taken place,
which it hasn't,
there's still no conclusive evidence that it actually arrived in the Americas, as no evidence of his fleet, men, or settlements have been uncovered on American soil.
Here's a picture he's showing, and it's an odd depiction. Very odd. Somebody has done this. This is Sumerian reed boats, or what you know as the high-prowed reed boats, which look a lot like Phoenicians and so on too, and getting the faces and the dragon heads on the front of them. Now, this is cultural appropriation here too, but what he's showing here is Sumerian reed boats, and then he's got African art that's more modern here as making the sails, and black people sitting all in here with some sultan guy sitting up on the top squat. And that's not an accurate depiction of history in any way, shape, or form.
Egypt is also credited as the possible originator of Olmec civilization. Construction of pyramids, mummification, similarities in religious practices, and the advent of writing systems are often presented as proof. However, these things can all be found all around the world, including those found in Indonesia.
In fact, pyramids and stuff can be found all over the place. He's going to go into descriptives of sizes here, and I want a preemptive to this so you can think about it when he says this, that this is a stepped pyramid built on a conjunction aimed at north, south, east, west in a correct conjunctive, and it has symbology all around, up and up and up, sexual symbology, all kinds of things, and then the stutkas and stuff that are up on top, which all has a symbology. It's well known now, though kind of kept, that this culture was hinged upon at one time anciently by Proto-Indo-Europeans. So was India, who has this very similar look to all of their things. Now, the linguistics show you that from India to Ireland and all through there, these people had a connection at one ancient time. Kind of in a biblical way, if you will. Before the last ice age, they were pretty much all one people, and there were pockets of others out in distant reaches, blacks being one far down in Africa and no longer in contact with people, and as the Sahara shut off, were unknown as Amerindians were to people from the old world. But they don't want to have that, and it's gotten really out of hand with what they try to claim as being their reality, and it needs to be put back in check. But then the reality realized of what you have done with assistance and things. But look, I mean, it's amazing. I'll go into that again later, please.
Pyramids vary significantly from those in Egypt, being much shorter, wider, and flat at their tops, often containing buildings on their peaks.
Now, what we always hinge upon is really trying to compare it to pyramids, and then people say, well, the pyramids are flat and so on. The original pyramids were step pyramids like this, and in fact, the first step is just a mastaba. The original crypts of the Sumerians were mastabas, and mastabas got built up and larger, and temples put on that look exactly like this. And that was the sharing that went around of a culture to the Egyptians. I have videos showing where at the start of the Badarian Nakata culture, there was an influx of people we would probably now refer to as the ancient Sumerians. And then later it happening again, apparently after a devastating flood called the followers of Shemsu-Hor. And you can see in their iconography this eagle god holding the pine cone, doing the fertility symbol to the tree of life that spawns over there, and they have the same culture. Cuneiform, things like this just add up. It keeps going. There's cave art in between the Red Sea and the Nile itself, showing them pulling gods along on these boats with these towers like temples on top of it, bringing this to the area, changing it rapidly. Your King Narmer and Menez, and they were not Negroids. I've made enough videos about that. So many videos have been made about that. But what connection would those people that we're trying to talk about have anything to do with West Africans that are trying to claim it? And the answer is actually nothing. Let's continue.
They also exclusively feature a stepped construction, a practice abandoned by Egyptians thousands of years prior in favor of smoothly sloping sides. The Olmec writing system is also completely and utterly different from those created in Egypt, and lacks even subtle similarities, pointing towards an undeniably independent development.
But yet a similar connected development. But it's something you could say, what would anybody do? You would start to develop pictures that would show you their words. Bird, dog, tree, okay? And then what if you had B be bird, D be dog, and T be a tree symbol? It's that symbol. It's called phonetic writing. But amazingly, it came out of so much symbology, which I've shown in a lot of my elder videos, that and words, and of course the sound we use for ball is not even the word they used for ball or dog, and so we can't understand the thing. But due to phonetics, because of the common phonetic writing, we were able to figure it out much later. Rosetta Stone really helped us a whole lot, because we knew of these other language that was on there, and we could transpose that, and therefore we could see what it was trying to say. But what did bird mean? What did little guy with a hand down mean? What is wiggle wiggle? And so on. What is this? Is that a mouth? Is that a sunset? No, that's a sunset. What's this? That looks like a feather. And it went from there, and it took linguistics, scientists, people that, do code breaking and crap and everything to even try to come smack at it. And really, the thing that found it was the Rosetta Stone. But some cultures still don't have their Rosetta Stone that we can find where it says something in both linguistics, and one of which that we know what it is, to where we can attach to others. And some of this is just ideograms and ideographic language. But then again, so isn't this in a refined phonetic way? And isn't Sumerian drawn in the same way? And then cuneiform is the master writing of all, the whole area at one time. And it shows you the connection that people don't want to try to make of who people used to be back then in those areas, because people in those areas and blend through now aren't the same people. Let's continue.
Perhaps the biggest inconsistency with the pre-Columbian African contact theory was the fact that the peoples of the Americas had no old world goods, crops, or technology. Iron smelting was unknown in the whole of the Americas, and in fact, smelting of any kind was restricted to just the Andean civilizations of eastern South America, who only smelted precious metals and bronze alloys.
And there's kind of a reason for that. And, I'll release a moment of it here. Because of other cultures and these people that would occasionally go over to them, they were basically telling them what they wanted or would trade with them. And so they were to collect up all this type of stuff. And then the kings were given an edict to make it, and boom, boom, boom. So you can make a city of gold. So later we can come back and get all your gold as we trade you for a bunch of other stuff. To certain people that were there, other people did not have the contact whatsoever. But let's continue.
While metallurgy was present elsewhere in the Americas, it was not smelted from raw ores, being cold forged from native outcroppings instead, and consisted of only copper, silver, and gold. In other words, it was not acquired from the crushing and melting down of metals from rocks in a furnace. It was also used exclusively for jewelry and ceremonial purposes, as opposed to tools, weapons, or armor, with few exceptions. Horses, cattle, and other beasts of burden were completely absent in the Americas until Columbus's voyages took place. And
they were also completely absent from Africa whatsoever. Both Taurus and the cattle that are found there are brought from the Anatolian area and cattle farmers and people up at places like Catalhoyuk and from the Sumerians area. And they were the ones that domesticated beasts. They were the masters of the beast. In fact, here's another Sumerian-Egyptian connection is the Gebel Erech knife shows you the master of beast symbology, which is in Sumerians, holding the two lions and things. Of people that were trying to keep crap apart, if you will. People that were making sure things didn't go wrong somewhat, keeping two lions apart. Here's another one for you. I'll do in a whole separate video too, but there's a river called El Elyon. It is the most high in the Bible, but it's actually a river, and it is the extent of the reach of lions at one time, which reached from Africa all the way up to North Africa. And there used to be a slightly different variation in North Africa, a Barbary lion that had extra fur around on its armpit areas and so on. And that's the ones that are shown in Sumerian and other art that are up through Asia. And Asia goes all the way to the Euphrates, but the Euphrates hooks up and to the left real bad, kind of like a horn here, or a crescent, why they call it that. And so that hinges in, and it's a large enough river and things that, and cats don't like to swim, very few do, and so we have the end of that being at about the Euphrates River and so on. And amazingly, on the other side of the next river over, which is a boundary point in some way due to the two rivers that came through there, and was called Eden in the Bible, and by the Sumerians themselves, Eden, the fertile land there, and where the Bible talks about. On the other side is another river called the Tigris, and east of that are tigers, all the way through the islands of Sumatra and all the way up into Siberia. Right? Okay, let's continue though.
Important old world crops like wheat, coffee, tea, and rice were completely missing. No metal tools, weapons, traditions, written records, inscriptions, or skeletal remains of old world explorers can be found in the New World that predate.
I hit that the wrong part, but yeah. So in all these wheat and emmer grains, and grains that are really putting out a whole lot rather than a few little myths, have all been genetically adapted by those ancient Sumerians and farmers. And that emmer wheat and emmer grain is what the Egyptians have, and it's still what we use today in variant forms of it. And everybody freaks out like Monsanto's freaking out. Well, they've only changed things a small percentage. They've looked at the old ones and the ones they have that Monsanto hadn't messed with, and there is a huge percentage of change that's been done to that. But it was also done to corn over in the New World, tomatoes and other things in crops. And what is a potato and what is all these other things have happened due to selections of things. These people and these ancient farmers had a lot more snap making things happen. Also, you can see it in the horsemanship and what's come out of that. Cattle themselves and how it does no longer look like a buffalo-ish type water buffalo oxen thing anymore in any way, shape, or form from what they used to slightly look like, and they've been changed. Humans have changed, things have changed. It's called evolution, whether people agree on a small point or a large point. Let's continue.
Columbus's voyages, with the sole exception of the small sites excavated in Canada and Greenland that were briefly occupied by Vikings. So if African explorers were already here, why would they have not brought these things to the Americas? Another
There's so many questions that can just easily be like no and then no, and you can just ask them, and all they do when you ask them is get mad because it deflates it and stuff. But also there he shows you that what we do find is that there was a lot of contact between Vikings somewhat up in that northern area there. What nobody's willing to forget is that it's there. And so there was pre-contact. That's Caucasians too. But people have found artifacts pre-Clovis, accidentally, whoopsie, and a lot of skeletons and burial mounds that have all been taken for some reason because Clovis first was grabbed so much on a concept. But what we have found now that preemptive to the Clovis people coming down, that a more Proto-Indo-European people had come down. I've got a video on this with a skeleton, everything, data they have found on this. It's not the only one, with Kennewick Man and others. And it shows you that if you dig past Clovis, which everybody's told to stop at, you find other things of other cultures. And it seems to have had something to do with not more of a Mongoloid people up at that top edge and coming across the Bering Strait, but a Proto-Indo-European type of people. Yeah, that genetics kind of go back towards like a Black Sea area. And then when you see those elongated head people that they have in Paracas, those also come to that same Altai region type of people that were up there, a Icelandic people, but no, far, far to the east. Let's continue.
more radical niche of these pre-Columbian African theorists are the ones who believe that blacks are in fact the indigenous people of the Americas, contrary to the Bering Strait theory. One of the more questionable reasons provided is the fact that all of humanity began in Africa. While this is true, that doesn't mean that Native Americans were black.
There is a concept of being out of Africa, and somehow, whenever debunked on the other facts, they try to say you came from us, like we came from Negroids, whereas the oldest Negroid, Congoid type Negroid that we talk about, skull ever found, is only about 4600 BC. You can look this up. Before that, they were considered to be a proto-Negroid. The first Nubian A colony, which aren't related to West Africans, show to be radically different than Nubia C that shows up over 500 years later. There's a 500 period contact where they have no interaction with Nubians reaching into them. So it shows you that Nubians really didn't have the influx. They were not Egyptians. But also, the out of Africa theory may have been totally debunked because a lot of the hominids that are found in Africa are found out of Africa. And so it seems that there are separate origins coming from way back then that are different interactions with other hominids that are no longer extant, of course, and therefore they're finding them and their genetic code is going to be about impossible. But there's a ghost hominid in black people, just like Neanderthals, that they have found, but they can't figure out which ancient hominid it was, because like Lucy and stuff, they can't get DNA out of them because it's just way too long ago. They're lucky to have recently got the Egyptian DNA genome, and it shows that it equals out to being Eurasian people. Yeah, it haplogroups that don't have anything to do with really the current people living there, and nowhere near Negroids at all, but it is related to the ancient people that lived around the Mediterranean, as he shows in the picture up here, and around and through, and 40,000 years ago pegs a Cro-Magnon time, but their extent out here at 100,000 years ago or more, and they found Greco-Pithecus freibergi and other things that are leading people to believe that at what point are we going to say that this is even connected to the humans that are studying this? You know, at what point do you say, okay, well, here's a modern man? Well, it's getting all the way up to the point of like a Homo erectus, Homo sapiens. Well, Homo sapiens were all over south of the Africa, as he's fixing to show it here, and they found them up in Morocco at Jib el Arud at 315,000 BC. That lineage pulls out of Africa. It's not related to the Negroids. If they can find genetically at this point that I can find. Anyhow, let's continue.
Americans left Asia over 15,000 years ago. According to that logic, all humans in the world should be black, not just indigenous Americans, since all humans began in Africa. And it's pretty obvious that not everyone's black. In addition to this, the original humans likely did not resemble modern West Africans or Bantu peoples at all. While it is true that the original human populations that left Africa most likely had darker skin, they did not resemble modern West Africans.
Here's an idea for you. Whenever it was the last ice age, the ice sheet was so bad and so come down north that people that were all before the last ice age up above that got shunted down and back into Africa, and there was influx back in and out of Africa a few times. It's what they've shown now, that not only was there whether it in or out of Africa, but then afterwards there was the Caucasoid people that had gone out, Homo erectus and a few others, and Homo erectus is showing us quite a variation in itself, but by the way, but an in and out of Africa thing that all floated and made a blend that went on, that most of which didn't interact with the Negroids, or the Congoids, I guess, if you will. The odd thing about this depiction they keep wanting to show, and they want to darken ancient Europe with that and Cheddar Man, where they basically painted him up with shoe polish, and it was totally debunked within a week of that. But this guy here has an extremely thin nasal slit. His nasal slit is as wide as the middle portion of his nose. They show him here to have a nasal aperture as wide as his mouth. Even this Negro that is just easily seen doesn't get a nasal aperture as wide as his mouth. Also, his lips are so much larger. But regardless of that, and possible skin tones, and the fact that he's bald, this man couldn't breathe out of his nose because those holes would have to take a straight dive in to make it to the thin nasal aperture he has. And in fact, that thin nasal aperture shows to be not a wide nose like what's shown here, and real thick. It's like some boxer Jack Dempsey looking thing. Look at this black man here as a thinner bridged nose. What is this 1.5-inch wide bridged nose? This is a terrible depiction of something, but people back then used to try to make things look ugh. Oh, you gotta be 35,000, ugh. And they stick a bunch of extra hair on him. Well, just shave the guy. He looks like Chuck Norris and people, not to offend Chuck, but modern depictions show that. Modern depictions of Neanderthal girls look like Shakira, for Christ's sake. It really isn't much of a difference. Not much. It's not all of a sudden bent over. The whole idea of the bent over Neanderthal was because they found a skeleton. One of the first ones actually had the back disease. Anyhow, let's continue.
Can be confirmed based on the bone structure and facial reconstructions of skeletons uncovered in places like Europe and Asia. It is much more probable that these early humans had features comparable to Khoi and San peoples of southern Africa, whom are among the most ancient continuous human populations in the world.
This does not say that Khoi San or Negroids, which aren't related to Khoi San, were all over the world, but it does indicate that he's saying that what that guy was probably more like was one of these. They don't have as thin a nasal slit, and I've just done a recent video that took off virally about these guys have ancient archaic Caucasian admix in them, and it's what imparts them their more yellowish skin to them and their more Asiatic looks in them, and people have lost their mind. I would generally like to tell you that most of these Khoisan don't really get on the internet so much, and the people that are yelling so much on my video aren't even related to them, and they're just throwing fits. The fit quickly goes from, oh, pardon me, sir, to you're a Neanderthal cave ape, and it just goes crazy. It's disgusting, and it's blacks causing their own racism by their own lies, and then getting mad about their lies, and then getting mad about being debunked about their lies that they're mad about.
Australian Aboriginals are also among one of the oldest human populations, being virtually isolated from the rest of humanity for upwards of 50,000 years.
Yep.
And aside from skin color, look very different from most sub-Saharan Africans, and being more related genetically with people of southern India.
And the islanders of Fiji and so on that lead up through there, that at one time we called Negritos, and the small pygmy people that were there. And there's a pygmy population in Africa itself there, very little left of it nowadays. But that pygmy population, we thought, okay, well, they're Negrito, it means little Negro. And we thought, oh, well, those are little Negroes somehow way over here. Well, no, we were wrong, but blacks want to grip onto that. But no, these people aren't even related to black people, what we call black people today, even though they are black. This lady that's fading away right now is a Caucasian with darker skin than most black people you've ever seen, with blonde hair. Does it blow your eye? Does it blow your mind? Does you, hello? And now we're going to go back onto another bad depiction with a wide nasal slit from somebody who was more tropical, as he's described, and get an understanding of it.
The only merit to the theory of indigenous black natives would be the discovery of the oldest skeleton in the Americas, formerly displayed in the Brazilian National Museum known as the Luzia woman. Through facial reconstruction, scientists concluded that she bore features atypical of Native Americans. Similar skeletons were later unearthed in the same region, resembling Luzia. Their physical features more closely resemble Khoisan peoples and other archaic human groups, rather than West Africans or Mongoloids.
And it's what these incredible Caucasian scientists are trying to figure out is like, okay, now here's the mind blower, people. Here's the mind. Khoisan don't have boats. They're not even really a coastal people that much and stuff. It's why they had no problem, because they were rarely migrating down in that area at all. There were no Congoids or Bantus down in that area really whenever South Africa was made and really created up by, again, Caucasians, these Boers. Anyhow, let's not go into that, but what's amazing here is the fact that back preemptive to this time, you see, Australia never connected to the other continent except for when it was Pangea, and much, much sooner. Unless something that we're not seeing, there was never a land bridge, no matter how low at glacial maximum you get during the Ice Age. No, it doesn't connect. Sure, Sri Lanka connects. Sure, Mu connects together somewhat, but a lot of those islands and Philippines and stuff don't really connect. And Japan and some of these islands don't connect. Other ones can eventually connect, and it's like, well, how did people get on those islands at the dating we're giving them without them having a boat? Don't tell me people could swim 200 miles in the ocean, although there have been people try to do it and put shark cages around them, and they get bit up by, all kinds of jellyfish, and man-o'-wars was what I was looking for. It's foolish to believe anything but that they might have had a boat. And recently in my videos I've shown some boats that predate when people are saying that there's a boat and so on off of it. But you look at their people there and you go, well, how the hell did they get there? What do they do? Hop on a floating tree? I mean, what are you going to try to go with? Let's just continue here. But
scientists and universities also claim that she has Negroid traits, but it is very common for people to blindly classify Africans, Negritos, and Aboriginals into the same category, despite their vastly different genetic makeups.
See?
This is more evident in the term Negroid itself, the prefix Negro meaning black, while the prefixes in Caucasoid and Mongoloid denote specific regions around the world.
Yeah, no, he's going to say regions around the world, and it does, but if you look at the definition of Caucasian, it's the holotype of a Caucasian that would have been up in that region. Where do Caucasians go? Well, they go all the way up through Mongolia into the edge of China, all the way down into North India, all the way across, yep, those are Caucasians, all the way across into Egypt, it says, all the way North Africa and the Horn of Africa, and across North Africa above the Sahara. Green Sahara Project now says preemptive to Sahara drying up, it was Caucasians. and around all of the Mediterranean in a loop with no blocking whatsoever, Caucasians all the way up into Europe, all across Russia, and back again. And it's not just the Caucasus region, although it's a heart center of an area of Proto-Indo-Europeans and a place pegged as being like, well, this is kind of the holotype of people that all spread out that way and this way and that way. I hear they can fly now. Mongolia and Asiatics are way up in the corner, and if you'll look at Khoisan, they seem to have that look also, and definitely not a Bantu or a West African look. Let's continue.
World rather than their skin color, with Caucasoids being proposed to have originated around the Caucasus Mountains, and Mongoloids believing to have originated around Mongolia.
Way out there.
There are a small percentage of modern scientists, however, who have abandoned the term Negroid in favor of Congoid, denoting the Congo region of Africa. With that said, there's a tendency of incorrectly categorizing them based on skin color or the size of their nasal cavity, despite the fact that both of these are genetic adaptations to hot or tropical weather. Similar to how many North American natives, the real North American natives, have long, narrow, and often hooked noses, an adaptation to cold weather and a trait commonly associated exclusively with Caucasoid peoples.
Also, though, look at that Jewish nose, look at that Roman nose, look at that, yeah, and then you see this type of nose that you see more in the western edge, I guess, if you will, of Eurasia.
Native Americans, on the other hand, fall within the Mongoloid group. Among the biggest questions for this theory of original black Native Americans are, why don't any black people of North or South America speak any Native American languages? Why are these languages spoken exclusively by people who are copper-skinned, straight-haired Mongoloids? Also, why do blacks have the same genetic disorders and attributes of people from Africa, like sickle cell anemia, G6PD deficiency, and tightly coiled hair? All traits that are virtually non-existent in Native Americans, Europeans, or Asians. And why did
and why do blacks try to say this type of thing? I mean, it's really disgusting. But blood types is what we had before to be able to try to show differential in people. Now we found DNA, and we've been able to decipher it pretty well, and we're just burgeoning with it. But incredible people are behind it and figuring out connections, and it's almost like songs on a record, and they go, hey, this song's on that guy's record too. He's got different songs though, and this song sounds like that song, but there's something different. What's different about it? It's that same difference in that other guy's song. So, okay, let me figure this out, and they work it out, genetics, time, things like that. It's amazing. Let's go on.
Blacks die from old world diseases like the copper-skinned peoples did, whom only make up 2% of the current population of the United States as a result of it? Why does
Let's not scope past that real quick. What he there showed was smallpox, and smallpox got indented into America. Now, I don't want to be too touchy here, but there were one people that had not been ever subjected to smallpox, where the Egyptians were, which is shown in mummies and stuff, and North Africa, the Levant, and all the way up to Europe, and it's some of the plagues that we went through and so on. But blacks had never encountered that. In fact, they broke out with a huge epidemic whenever it came to Americas. In fact, it spread into the native population of Amerindians, and then they got quarantined onto the islands like Jamaica and so on in the West Indies, and they had to have actually got over it. And a lot of people did die, and they had to get over it before they were allowed to come to North America again. By the way, this had already happened preemptively to the South Americans, and it's the reason there was a lot of South Americans that had died from it, because none of the Amerindians that they ran into at this point apparently had been recently in contact with anybody that had ever had it before, because it broke out with them as an epidemic too. And in reality, most of the Indians west of the Appalachians, we didn't even get to meet whenever we went west. But that's probably for another video. Let's continue.
Actually, all indigenous art of the Americas portray physical features of these peoples instead of blacks. Even Olmec art, the creators of the giant stone heads, The overwhelming majority of their art is created in the image of these people, bearing features that are undeniably Native American. People throughout the Black diaspora have undeniable linguistic and religious links with Africa. For example, people of the Caribbean speak a Creole known as patois. It is somewhat of a Creole of English and African languages, with so many borrowed words and sentence structures directly from African languages that a native speaker of English would have trouble understanding. Patois is so different from normal English that it's a wonder that it's not considered its own language to begin with, instead of being considered a mere dialect.
It's got
Most of these
slang in it.
similarities can be directly traced back to the Tree language of the Akan people, which is where most slaves were imported from during Britain's colonial wars against the Ashanti Empire, located
where they were catching and selling their own kind of way, like a kind of slave market, really. And white people weren't running out trying to catch them. It's not the way that it went down. Let's continue.
on the Gold Coast, or what is known today as Ghana. AAVE, or African American vernacular, also contains several borrowed elements, including the absence of an R at the end of certain words, the use of double negatives, and even certain slang such as attributing the words cool or chill with something being good, relaxed, or calm.
Yes, to be calmed down, to not be overheated, to be cool, to chill out, man, to, put some northern ice on that hot, hot thought. And, chill, groovy, man. This is probably going to go to a part 2, people, even though part 2 is going to be probably a little bit much shorter, although I may go into some other visions and showings here. In fact, let's just go ahead and hold it right here so I can do a secondary part on this that's worthy and value. We'll start it and begin right here with a slight beginning and then go right into it. It will be in your top left-hand corner attached to it, and if you'll click on it, we'll go directly to part 2. Like, share, and subscribe before you go. And click that notification bell. People aren't getting their notifications. There it is up in the top left-hand corner. Grab it. If you've already seen it before, you can go to the one on the right or another one, or check the channel out for 1,000 more. We'll see you there. Peace.